PJ Fleck and the Minnesota Golden Gophers fall to 0-3 against Power 4 opponents this season. Overall, after losing to Michigan 27-24 in a game that became a thriller after initially looking like a potential blowout, the Minnesota Golden Gophers fall to 2-3, 0-2 in Big Ten Conference play. However, they never quit, and honestly, in hindsight, the game reminded me a little bit of a Walmart Georgia-Alabama. Obviously, neither of these two teams are close in caliber to the Crimson Tide or the Bulldogs. They're not even sitting at the same table. They're not even 5 stories below those two teams. They're more like 10 stories or 15 stories below those two teams. But Minnesota did what Georgia did, in essence, where they're playing on the road against a team that is profiled by power ratings and by on-field results as being better than them, although being very similar in many ways. And the home team gets turnovers, they're playing lights out in some aspects, and they're leading big at the half. But they never give up, they go back to their roots, they try new things, they are desperate in some ways, and the desperation pays off because it's calculated, like Max Brosmer and Carson Beck just heaving passes deep, but with accuracy in completing them. And overall, I think that not only is Minnesota perhaps better than their 2-3 record indicates, and not only is PJ Fleck at least a competent coach, it also gave Michigan a massive reality check yesterday. Michigan right now is ranked 10th in the AP and coaches poll. Let me tell you something. From an objective point of view, if Michigan is a top 10 team, this is the weakest year in college football that I can remember. Weakest year that I can remember. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Michigan's lapses and failures on offense and defense. We'll talk about Minnesota stepping up and stopping the run, but not exactly doing much better at anything else that they needed to improve on. All of that and more in this video from College Football with Sam. And thank you so much for watching. And before we resume, I want you, yes you, to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, to hit that notification bell, punch it if you have to, and share this video around to other college football fans who watch from noon until past midnight and who are invested in the sport like we are. It's the best sport in the land. And comment your reaction and analysis down in the comments below. You probably missed something that I saw. What I meant to say is you probably saw something that I missed. But it goes both ways. We help each other here on College Football with Sam and the awesome community that we have. We're less than 900 subscribers away from 20,000. And once we reach that, I'll be doing a giveaway. So you won't want to miss that. And you also won't want to miss our Discord server. And join that in the link in the description or the pinned comment, where we talk about college football 24/7, and there are dedicated threads, conversational threads for every Big Ten football team, and also other college football conferences. But joining the Discord server, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification bell, and commenting your thoughts, and watching the video all the way through, all of those things, and sharing help you out. They help the channel out, because every amount of investment that we get is poured back in to College Football with Sam, the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube. But let's dive deep and observe what should have been, could have been a blowout, but wasn't. And you have to give Minnesota credit there. And you have to look at Michigan with a massive side eye. There's a reason that this team currently is an underdog to Washington, who is the antithesis of efficient, given what they did against Washington State and also Rutgers. But Minnesota is not very efficient either. Michigan obviously isn't. And this was, like I said, a very Walmart, not even Walmart. Let's think of a store that's extinct. This is like the Blockbuster edition of Georgia, Alabama, is what this game was. Home team gets up big. They're dominating. They're poning. They kind of let their foot off the gas. And the team that's losing, to their credit, never gave up. So it was never garbage time where Minnesota or Georgia scored. It was all legitimate. They just didn't end up winning, despite nearly coming back and the other team practically choking. They didn't finish the choke job. They just nearly performed it. And you look at the basic stats, and that kind of is how it comes across. Minnesota had more total yards in this game. They averaged a half additional yard per play. They had 296 total yards to Michigan's 241, 20 first downs to Michigan's 15. Michigan actually had about a 7-minute possession advantage, which I found to be odd. But I think it was that final drive with the field goal and also the first half where Michigan just mostly controlled the clock. And they also had some drives in the second half where they got first downs, but just couldn't extend the drives. And it was odd, too, because Michigan did not exactly manage the clock properly in the final quarter of the game. There were still some seconds on that play clock that you got to chew. But Minnesota outgained Michigan. They gained more yards per play than Michigan did. A lot of that was their passing offense. When you have a passing offense but no rushing offense versus a rushing offense but no passing offense, you're going to be the more explosive team if you're the former, because more explosive plays are going to happen through the air more often than on the ground. That's why Minnesota outgained Michigan, as they had the much better quarterback, much better passing offense overall. They scored less points per play, though. They only scored 0.343 points per play as opposed to Michigan 0.435 points per play. Michigan on a points per play basis, it's actually been one of their more stronger areas this season, is how efficient they are in scoring points relative to the fact that they don't get many plays, they don't gain many yards on said plays, and how one-dimensional they are. It's very, very Iowa-esque. Win a bunch of close games, opponents outgain you, but you score more points, and therefore you win due to, at least for a half, elite defense and special teams. Michigan's never been consistent in those areas this season, but they have enough talent on defense and special teams to where you get at least an elite 30 to 45 minutes out of the defense or the special teams. You saw that against USC. You saw that against Minnesota. And the rushing offense is good enough to where this team can win ball games. But they can't dominate them, as their 5 games through this season, the month of September, have showcased. Michigan won this game because they blocked a punt and because they forced 2 turnovers, and one of them put them in a position to score a touchdown. Michigan had 5 penalties for 54 yards. They were very sloppy at times, especially at the end of the game. And Minnesota had 7 penalties for 51 yards. Not a clean game whatsoever, like I said. Only in the aspect of Minnesota coming back and nearly winning was it like Georgia-Alabama, because again, Georgia trailing 23 points at the half, Minnesota trailing by 18. The margin gets a little bigger, where it's 24-3 Michigan at one point, and for a while in the third quarter, Alabama was still ahead by the 23 points, but then took the foot off the gas, and Georgia and Minnesota each forced plays to get back in the game. Speaking of Minnesota, PJ Fleck has got to adapt to his team because, like I said, competent coach. I think he showed that in this game, where after Iowa, you're thinking, is he on the hot seat? Is he in control of this team? I think this game answers yes, but he still made some pretty bad decisions. I thought that Minnesota abandoned the run too early, and it showed. It very much showed. I think they abandoned the run too early. They have been passing more than running this season, and part of me gets it because their offensive line isn't that good. Minnesota, for example, allowed Michigan to sack them 5 times and get 9 TFLs. Iowa was able to get pressure on Brosmer and halt Darius Taylor in their rushing attack. Darius Taylor's still really good, by the way. Just isn't putting up the same numbers because of the style of offense and also the offensive line. However, despite the fact that maybe it is the right decision, I'm a little indecisive here when talking about this. Part of me thinks it's, why not? Let Brosmer fling it around. Another part of it, though, is you have Darius Taylor, you have Jaron Mangum, you have Marcus Major. Run the ball and control the clock. And don't put the ball in harm's way, where Brosmer had multiple turnover-worthy throws. And Daniel Jackson's fumble, Minnesota's second turnover, was again through the passing attack. Darius Taylor had a long rush of 6. Jaron Mangum had a carry of 16. It felt like the blocked punt and Minnesota wanting to get in the game and feeling like they couldn't stay in led to the pass happiness. Like the performance early on in the game led to that. And I don't feel like that's the way to play it, because as I said to a friend of mine who's a Minnesota fan, when he's thinking the long field goal that Dragan Kesic missed is the wrong move, I told him, well, it's actually the right move, because Michigan can't score and they're a completely one-dimensional offense, and you got to have faith that with how the run defense is performing that you'll do well and you'll hold them. But ultimately he missed the field goal and Michigan got a few turnovers. They got a blocked punt, and that's that, really. I think that there needs to be a different type of strategy with Minnesota. There has to be. Their DNA is to run the football, and the fact that they abandoned that early may have cost them the game. Maybe if they ran it some more, and I know Michigan was doing a pretty good job of stopping it, but I think if they just stayed a little bit more on schedule, running the football early, they could have came out with a win. Absolutely. But that's just an opinion of mine. I don't know how correct that is. But it's an opinion. I think that Fleck has to adapt to his team. The DNA is to run the football. You see here that when you take out the sack numbers, they ran for 3.6 yards per carry. A lot of that was in those longer drives in the second half, but they were having some success getting 3-4 yards per pop early. Got 2 rushing touchdowns in total. And really what set Minnesota off schedule was just the amount of pressure on Brosmer, more than Minnesota occasionally getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage or only getting 1-2 yards per carry on the ground. Because for Michigan and their rushing attack, they had similar struggles. Michigan just didn't pass it 40 times. They only passed it 18 times. And Michigan only gave up 1 sack compared to 5. That was really the biggest difference here and what didn't help Minnesota's offense stay on schedule. They only got on schedule later in the football game. And speaking of that, with the drives that they made, I wonder, is Minnesota's offense legit? Tell me down below if you agree with that they are, whether you disagree with that, like whatever you think, let me know. Because I think that there is a chance that it is a legit offense. And by legit, I just mean it's competent. They can score. They're not an Iowa-level offense, or they're not 2023 Minnesota's level offense, which was non-existent. Like they're a good FBS offense, average Power 4 offense. I think there is a chance that they are that. You look at these drives in the second half. Let me show you. So, second half ends. It's done. You go here. Oh, wow, this is... ESPN's drive chart is, like, broken. But after the interception that Alex Orji throws, Minnesota goes on a 14-play, 76-yard drive that eats up 5 minutes of clock. Ends in a touchdown. Michigan then takes off 2 minutes of clock, 3 plays, 6 yards. They punt. Minnesota nearly returns the punt for 6, then 3 plays, 16 yards. Only about 50 seconds off, they score. Somewhat fluky, I would say, but that final drive was big. The drive after the interception, and then the final drive that Minnesota had. 14 plays, 75 yards, 2 minutes, 56 seconds. Michigan's defense did play noticeably different, but I'm not going to say it's garbage time, because it wasn't. Minnesota had a legitimate chance to win that football game. And Michigan couldn't put them away, and that's a credit to both Minnesota and also a detriment to Michigan. I don't think this offense is legit. I think it's average, below average, maybe even bad relative to the Power Four. There's a reason they only scored 27 points against Nevada and couldn't do anything against North Carolina. But their quarterback showed potential, and that wide receiver core is good. I mean, Daniel Jackson is one of the Big Ten's better receivers. Elijah Spencer is not to be messed with. Nick Callerup showed that he has receiving potential, and Darius Taylor has been working out of the backfield this season. You look overall, they had 258 passing yards, averaged 9.6 yards per reception, which is pretty good. Will Johnson was out in this game, and so was Josiah Stewart, so Michigan's pass offense was a little handicapped, but it's still impressive. And they did have a passing touchdown as well later in the game. It was a beautiful throw, beautiful catch. I just think that with Minnesota, they're a good team for being 2-3. They're not a good team, but for having a 2-3 record, I think there is something there. And this is going to be a game that I'm going to preview. USC traveling to Minnesota this week is an absolute trap game for the Trojans because they have Penn State the following week. They've shown vulnerability in not being secure with the football. They struggle to run the ball. And Minnesota showed against Michigan that they do have some pieces to stop the run. And Miller Moss looks like Lincoln Riley's worst quarterback of his head coaching career outside of maybe Spencer Rattler. And it's on the road, colder environment. I'm curious to see what that game looks like. And it's a huge opportunity for PJ Fleck. If you want to show that you're a good head coach, that you can still do things at Minnesota that most coaches can't do at Minnesota, you beat USC. That's what you do this coming weekend, and that's going to be the last thing I'll say about Minnesota. In regards to Michigan, Michigan struggled on the offensive line. Now, Michigan's offensive line I still think is a good, great offensive line. After USC, I thought to myself that there was a chance it could be near elite to elite. Now, I'm back to thinking that, okay, this unit is great, maybe near elite. They could also be good or just above average. There's no doubt, though, that every single play, your strategy against Michigan is going to be stacking the box, which is something Minnesota and their defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, didn't do too well on that 14-play, 58-yard drive that burned 6 minutes and 32 seconds of clock, where Dominic Svada kicked the 35-yard field goal. Minnesota was not stacking the box to the degree that I thought they should have on that drive, and that was a pretty critical error because I'm sure... Let me look at the drive chart again. I'm pretty sure Michigan ran for 14 plays in a row there, which shows you they have their rushing offense is really good. Yeah, run, pass to Colston Loveland. So they didn't run every time in a row, but for the most part, they pounded the rock. For the most part, Michigan did on that drive. This offensive line, looking at it, observing it, analyzing it, to put it frankly, it's not the caliber of offensive line that can carry an incomplete passing offense. This is not Michigan's 2022 offensive line. It's not Ohio State's 2022 offensive line. It's not Georgia's offensive line in 21, 22, or 23, which makes mostly mediocre running backs outside of James Cook look like they're really good. This is not Oregon's offensive line of last year or 2022. It's not Alabama's offensive line of 2020. Do I need to go on? It's a great offensive line. It could be near elite, but it's not better than Michigan's offensive line of 2023, and Michigan's offensive line of 2023 could not carry a run-heavy team to victory, or at least to scoring a bunch of points like the 2022 line could. The pass protection in this game clearly improved. Minnesota's pass rush, I don't think, is at the same level that USC's is, but USC practically got home every time Michigan dropped back to pass. Minnesota rarely did. Orji did a much better job of maneuvering the pocket, which helped the line as well. But the run blocking did not have too much push, and that's a credit to Minnesota's defensive line, who is better than they have been in the past under Fleck, but they're still not. This isn't even close to Penn State or Ohio State or Iowa on the D-line. They may not even be the level that Illinois or Indiana is at on the defensive line. And if you're Michigan, the expectation, again, is to reach the playoff. Like, 8-4 is not acceptable. And this looks like an 8-4, even 7-5 caliber team. 9-3 would just be it is what it is. 10-2 is the only 10-2 or greater is the only thing that could be considered a success. And this team, with this offensive line and all the other issues they have, doesn't look like that caliber of team. I mean, look what they did in the ground game. Michigan's D-line, they had a sack, or they allowed one sack, 6 tackles for loss. The O almost looks like a D there. That's why I read it as D-line. They only had 163 yards rushing and averaged 3.9 yards per carry. It's just unbelievable. And that's factoring out the 1 sack that Orji took as well. They still averaged under 4 yards per carry. I know that Michigan took some knees, but only averaging 4 yards per carry against Minnesota when Iowa, who didn't have a passing offense either, totally blitzed them on the ground. That's a little bit concerning. It is. And I think it shows the fact that this offensive line doesn't yet have a complete identity. They're very up and down, go with the ebb and flow of things. They come alive when they need to, like on that field goal drive and early in the game right out of the gate, but they're ultimately more so being carried by Kalel Mullings than they are helping Kalel Mullings. And that's what I said in my video about Michigan State and Ohio State. Like, if you're the Buckeyes, yes, Henderson and Judkins look elite, but you want to see more holes. You don't just want to see Judkins and Henderson pop several big plays and then struggle to get consistent yardage outside of those big plays, because that won't work in the playoffs. That won't work against Penn State. It may not even work against Oregon if their defense continues to improve. For Michigan, this is even worse because Ohio State actually has an elite wide receiver room. They have a great quarterback. Their running back room is better, and their offensive line may even be better. I'm not going to go that far yet, but they're pretty close. They're much closer than they have been in the previous 3 seasons. And yeah, I mean, just look at the numbers. Mullings is the only productive back on this team. Edwards is somewhat productive, but not to the degree you'd want him to be given his talent level and what he can do. By the way, great route by Donovan Edwards. He had a wheel route that Orji could have thrown a touchdown to him on. Instead, he threw to Colston Loveland, and it got picked off by Ethan Robinson. That's really when the momentum turned. And overall, when you don't have elite anything except for defensive line, like when only one of your positions are elite and you have a bad quarterback and a bad receiver core, this is what's going to happen. Michigan cannot protect a lead, or at least have faith that they're going to protect a lead. They can never step off the gas. That's really the lesson moving forward here. They struggled on the offensive line, and the defensive line did a good job. I think a great job, given that Josiah Stewart was out, and also Will Johnson being out doesn't help the defensive line's duties and getting to the quarterback. There's going to be less opportunities for coverage sacks. But Michigan's offense is just bad. Let me go through and name all the teams in the Big Ten that I think have a better offense off the top of my head. Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State when they're not turning over the football, Maryland. I'm even going to say Rutgers because at least Kaliak-Manis looks good. Washington when they're not calling stupid 4th down plays. Obviously you have USC. UCLA has a worse offense than Michigan does, but that's not saying much. Northwestern has a worse offense than Michigan. Purdue does. Nebraska has a better offense. Minnesota, I'm kind of iffy on, but I'll lean that Minnesota's is better, just slightly, because it's more balanced. And Wisconsin with Van Dyke healthy absolutely does. With Locke, it's questionable. I mean, Michigan's offense is not good. It's an awful unit. It's awful. They're good at running the ball. They may be great at running the ball. They have the potential, I think, to be elite at running the football. But when the passing offense is as bad as it is, you're not going to be better than average on offense. And right now, they're not living up to their potential on offense one bit, and their ceiling already is pretty low offensively. Like, at best, this is probably an average, above average offense. At the very best, right now, it's just straight up bad. And the staff is underwhelming. I'm watching Wink Martindale, as I said on my live post-game reaction to this game. I'm watching Wink Martindale send a 0 blitz on a critical down against Minnesota. Like, what are you doing? You're getting pressure with 4 people. Drop them back into zone, and you're not gonna give up anything. Or if you do, oh well, at least you made the right play call. I'm watching man coverage when Michigan has, for the past several years, functioned better in zone, and especially this year with all the youth that they have, they've played better in zone. Just keep doing what you're doing. Like, why make the adjustment from the first half where you're sending 4, you're sitting back in zone, you're getting picks, picking up sacks, even with all the punts that Michigan's having, you're forcing Minnesota to punt right back. Why make that adjustment? Why do it? It's nonsensical. Bud Elliott put it well with the defense. With the offense, I somewhat disagree with him on. Michigan has to pass the ball. They have to force themselves to pass the football to give Orji practice. And he did much better against Minnesota than he did against USC passing the ball. And I don't think USC's defense is all that much better than Minnesota's. Like, relative to competition, he played a better game. Orji has to pass the football. The receivers have to get involved because the more repetitions, the better. That will help make the offense balanced, therefore raise the offense's floor and also raise its ceiling and also raise its average performance. It'll make the offense better. But for the defense, this defense has some of the most talented players in the country. They have potentially 4 first-rounders, 3 of them on the defensive line. 2 of them didn't play, but 2 of them did play. And Rayshon Benny's an awesome defensive tackle as well, and Derek Moore is great off the edge. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? The defense doesn't need adjustments compared to what Michigan did against USC and also what they did against Minnesota for a half. Like, that is how Michigan's defense will have to be for the rest of the year to perform to their ceiling. Why make the adjustments? And then as for Kirk Campbell, motioning a wide receiver to the left of the formation when everyone and their mother knows you're going to run it to burn a Minnesota timeout, and there's a snap. The snap goes into the wide receiver. I don't know who to blame on that play except for Kirk Campbell. Don't be using eye candy when you're just trying to burn out the clock, especially when you're only going to give Minnesota, 5 seconds left? Like, running the ball is the clear move. It's the intelligent move. Why even try to fake Minnesota out there? I just don't get it. I think that Michigan's staff is very underwhelming. I think that Campbell and Martindale in particular, but more so Kirk Campbell, are holding Michigan back. And that also falls at the feet of Sharon Moore. I observe this team, and they have athleticism. They have strength. They have power. I don't think this is an issue with strength and conditioning, and outside of maybe at linebacker and wide receiver, position coaches. I mean, what Tony Alford has done to Kalel Mullings is really good, and I think Benjamin Hall is doing well, and Donovan Edwards looks better as a individual running back than he has before outside of 2022, which I think was mainly due to Michigan's elite offensive line that year. But the coordinators are not putting these players in good positions. Like, on defense, players are constantly out of position. It's similar on the offense. The quarterback situation and the wide receiver situation are the epitome of that. Out of position, not accurate, not making plays. The Wolverines, this is the epitome of a staff that is not holding their team to the highest standard. They had a 24-3 lead, and they nearly choked it, and it was at home. I don't know what to tell you outside of that. So that, in regards to Michigan, is all I'm going to say. It's the same thing with Minnesota. Michigan, compared to the teams they're typically on a similar level with, Penn State and Ohio State, had a far inferior performance. It's very clear in my mind that the Big Ten right now, outside of Ohio State and Penn State and maybe Oregon is pretty iffy. Pretty iffy on multiple fronts. Thank you so much for watching this video. And also, before we get out of here, Kalel Mullings is my game MVP. 24 attempts, 111 rushing yards, averaged 4.6 yards per carry, and he had 2 rushing touchdowns. He had a great game once again, and at least the staff this time put him in a position to be the team's #1 running back, which he is. Unfortunately, though, if you're a Michigan fan, he's only one player. The rest of the offense has to step up before Michigan takes the road against Washington. Otherwise, that could be Michigan's 2nd loss of the season in a schedule where anyone in their remaining games outside of maybe Northwestern can beat them. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488, Brasco Rascal for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Conolulu OH, Ismar Tyler 9, and Chilton Cush for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Shanisha Cockrell for being All-Conference members. Have a great day, everyone, and make sure to check out the merch store, Patreon page, and Discord server via the links in the description and down below in the pinned comment. See you guys soon. Go Gophers and go Blue.